Well, thanks very much for the welcome and thanks for the opportunity to speak with this great group. So good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending on where in the world you are in this virtual space and in a year unlike any other. But this has been a great thing. So it's day three, all right, of the annual meeting, which is a good thing, and it means the end is in sight, and cocktails are on the horizon. So that's always a good thing, even if shared virtually. That's always the fellowship is always a good thing. You know, this, as you all may recollect, the association membership, the relationship between the Association of the United States Army and the U.S. Army Warrant Officer Association was the first such agreement that AUSA engaged in, and it's proven to be more beneficial, speaking from the AUSA side, than I frankly ever imagined. And that, I think, is because we are joined in common cause to support soldiers and provide, as we say at AUSA, provide a voice for the Army. And when we do that together, we seem to be more effective. And so we certainly at AUSA welcome, we cherish, we value this relationship with the U.S. Army Warrant Officer Association, and certainly welcome you to our national headquarters here in Arlington, Virginia, where you are always welcome, to be sure. There are challenging times ahead for the U.S. Army. We heard this last week during the AUSA's annual meeting held virtually, but a very good series of sessions. But one constant theme, I think, from the senior Army leadership is that there are challenges ahead. And I think that's irrespective of the outcomes of the elections in a couple of weeks, that there are going to be some real issues for the Army to address in both the near term and in the longer term. Unsurprisingly, there's been lots of talk here in and around Washington, D.C., that defense spending, probably best case, is flat and may likely decline. The other budgetary pressures, the trillions, like with the T, trillions of dollars appropriately spent in combating the COVID-19 virus, will place budgetary pressures across the spectrum, particularly of discretionary spending. And as you know, defense spending is the biggest chunk of that. So there are budgetary pressures caused just simply by the circumstance. And inside what is likely to be a flat or declining defense budget, there are going to be increasing claimants or competition for perhaps fewer defense dollars. That's going to be a real challenge. Even in a defense environment where the secretaries of the services, the chiefs of the services generally agree on the broad things, there is some pretty serious competition for resources within the Department of Defense. New submarines, new intercontinental ballistic missiles, new penetrating bombers, the Space Force, many other claimants are going to present a real challenge for the Army moving ahead in making its case for why Army budgets need to not only remain stable, but actually increase. Secretary of Defense Esper has been very consistent in his public pronouncements and in his engagements on the Hill, stating that defense requires 3 to 5% real growth in order to maintain a competitive edge against our near-peer competitors, principally Russia and China. 3 to 5% real growth. That means even a flatline defense spending which is declining purchasing power over time. Now, unsurprisingly, that 3 to 5% real growth message doesn't get received real well amongst the members of Congress who have many other competing demands. So the challenge, I think, for our Army more broadly across defense is how do you address the demands, the requirements of services within this budgetary environment. I think what we heard last week very consistently from the Secretary of the Army, from the Chief of Staff of the Army, from many others, was a sense of very precise prioritization, very rigorous prioritization within the Army budget, and importantly, consistent prioritization. Many of us have been around long enough to know that the Army changes its mind fairly frequently. And so it's been very rewarding, actually, over the past couple of years to see the Secretary and the Chief, first Dr. Esper and General Milley, now Secretary McCarthy and General McConville, remain very consistent on the prioritization and of the requirements within the United States Army. That's been well received on the Hill. The Army Warrant Officer Association and AUSA can help reinforce the consistency of that prioritization in our engagements on the Hill with media and with many others. The Army's challenge is how to balance force structure, force posture, readiness, and modernization within a very challenging budget environment. And getting that mix just right is a real challenge. We in the association world can help with that. We can help others understand why things are prioritized the way they are, and frankly, what are the consequences of resource decisions that are pending before the Congress and in others. I'll give you just one example. So the Army spends more money on people than it does any other service. The soldiers are the platform, the fighting platform of the United States Army, as opposed to submarines or satellites or airplanes or missiles. It's the soldier. So end strength matters. That's how the Army delivers capability in large degree to meet combatant command requirements around the globe. So I had a conversation a few months ago with a staffer that said, why is the Army all hung up on end strength? That doesn't the average battalion have about 700 soldiers? That's pretty close, probably. And they said, well, couldn't you really do just about the same thing if you had 650 in that battalion? And so that's the nuanced challenge that the Army faces. It's easier to talk about ships and planes and satellites and what the degradation to readiness is if you eliminate a ship or an airplane or a missile. It's more difficult when you start talking about seemingly relatively small numbers of soldiers. We can help people understand why a battalion of 650 cannot accomplish the same missions that a battalion at full strength can accomplish, particularly over time in duration and in combat. I think another thing where the associations can help is to fight back against my least favorite phrase in the world, which is do more with less. You don't do more with less. You do less with less, period. Or you break the backs of soldiers upon whose backs those missions reside. So we can combat against that, I think, and say it isn't do more with less. There are real consequences to recruiting, retention, readiness, and modernization with these resource challenges that the Army will face. In all that we do, I would encourage you at the Warrant Officer Association to argue to preserve what I view is the crown jewel of the Army, and that is the all-volunteer force. It is the people that make all the difference in the world. We see that emphasized now with General McConville and Secretary McCarthy, SMA Grinston, that this is people first, and that's really very important. I enlisted in the Army in 1973. In 1973, the United States Army was the best Army in the world. Compared to today's Army, it wasn't very good. And so our challenge now is how do we make sure that the Army of 2020 and moving toward an Army of 2028 as a waypoint and then on to 2035, how do we ensure that every step along the way, that Army remains the premier land force on the planet? Our associations have a role to play in supporting recruiting and retention. We can help, and I encourage us to find new ways to do just that. Many years ago, when I was serving in Europe, Admiral Jim Stavridis was then the commander of European Command, and he coined a phrase that many of you probably saw in AFN commercials in Iraq or Afghanistan or Kuwait or wherever you happened to be, and his theme was stronger together. That phrase got kind of co-opted by some political campaigns, but the essence is still true. It is stronger together. It was particularly true in Europe, where the allies are so important, but it is true, remains very true today. And I think the relationship between the U.S. Army Warrant Officer Association and the Association of the United States Army gives great credence to that theme. We are indeed stronger together. We're proud of this relationship. We want to continue to make it stronger day by day, and together we will do just that. Thanks very much for letting me join you for a few minutes. Best of luck to you as you continue your annual meeting and head toward the finish line. We at AUSA are proud to be partnered with you. Thank you.